Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning into this story. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And before we start, a big thank you to those supporting the channel with an extra membership, especially the Scouts. I see you, I appreciate you, and I create this for you. Now, let's get started. 30 months leaves its mark in the quiet ways. By how the smoke curls from the chimney without wasting heat, by the way the gravel path crunches when someone's coming in before they're close enough to call out, by the number of meals eaten because the ledger said you could, not because you were hungry. We stayed in Black Hollow, once the Black Hollow family campground, now just Exchange Hollow, because its bones were solid, the kind of place you could teach to work for you without drawing eyes from miles away. We pushed the fence line out twice, laced an inner ring with concertina wire so close you could hear it hum in the wind, and laid gravel lanes so strangers had to announce themselves with every step. The bridge over the river got a second locking pin and a pulley system so a single pull could drop the plank into the water and another could haul it back up. No paint, no bright colors, just grey, weathered wood that didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. Keeping fed never got easier, just more organized. The smokehouse ran steady. The garden kept its cold frames through frost and snow. Trout lines stayed set where the current eased above the bend. Every system had a notebook. Dates, numbers, temperatures. Guesswork died the day we started logging everything. A roof leak taught us to run gutters into barrels. A spoiled batch of greens taught us to label every jar like someone else might have to trust it with their life. We brewed sanitizer with clear markings, not because we wanted it to look good on a shelf, but because tired hands make mistakes when labels don't speak plain. The radio mast went up on a windless morning, tripod locked, guy lines tight to the snack bar's old footings. We tarred the feed through, switched the set on, and the static shifted. At first, faint voices, nothing you could trust. Then clearer ones, names, locations. The day a check-in used our call sign, Exchange Hollow reading you. Nobody clapped or cheered. We wrote the hour on the wall and scratched a mark beside it. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were on the map again, quietly, carefully, but on it all the same. People found us and asked to stay. 7 did. 3 didn't make it through last winter when a hard cough moved through the camp and nothing we had was enough. Jer, who had once wandered past our first cabin with a cracked voice and too much pride, died in the isolation tent while snow erased our tracks. Noah, a carpenter with clever hands, made our doors close better, and then a fever took what the bad air started. Tasha, a teacher who bought quiet with stories for the little ones who came to trade, lay under blankets while the wind tried to open every seam we hadn't found yet. We set stones beneath the big beach by the pump house and set their names in oil. If a place is going to speak for you later, give it the words now. We hardened without turning into statues. Lena kept the lab hour, small batches of soap and sanitizer, careful bleach charts, posted where tired minds could see them. Mark, who arrived a boy, and now took knots and voltage like a second language, ran the power board and the bridge. He trained a pair of newer hands to read sign, to walk slow when slow carried farther than fast, and to stop talking when the trees did. Lieutenant Dan Harker, the guard officer we'd pulled from a crushed trailer years back, taught safety like gospel. Muzzle discipline, single shots, don't write checks with your magazines, move after any shot that needs moving. Cal learned every deer trail between here and Tionesta, and came back with routes and faces, and the way both change after rain. Becky ran maps in her head and memory in her shoes. Ruth planted where soil said yes. Omar coaxed small engines to keep their promises. Erin wrote vitals and learned the quiet ways to ask someone how far their pain had moved since morning. The radio gave us 3 steady friends at distance. Echo Flight, the ex-military group who grounded 2 cargo helicopters, and a Black Hawk in a deep forest near the Allegheny Reservoir, set up tents into a little city that ran on discipline and JP-8. They had medics, night optics, and the kind of training that makes a mess smaller instead of bigger. We gave them seed and filters. They sent a medic twice to check our protocols and never tried to run our house. The ledger crew, looters by any other year's word, signed a truce at our road and kept it, stripping towns and vehicles on dead routes and paying their way with batteries, copper, and honest intel. The third group formed downriver. We called them the Spillway Co-op because they worked the flow near Tionesta, and the smaller set of rigging at Piney Dam, making light and cold from water. They traded ice and smoked fish for lye, vinegar, and guard shifts when figures gathered along their banks. By the time month 30 rolled over, Exchange Hollow had a shape people recognized. Approach on foot with hands easy, wash at the bucket line, weapons holstered during neutral hours, trade tokens stamped with dates, and no one camping inside the inner fence. If you wanted help, you followed the rules. If you didn't, the path to the road stayed wide enough to use. The day's ledger began with light northerly wind and the smell of damp stone. I walked the perimeter and rubbed chalk marks where lashings needed love. The warning stakes beyond the road fork, what we put up after the night we stopped and tied men to fence posts to make a point nobody wanted us to make, had been changed months back. No bodies now, no spectacle, just a board cleanly painted, exchange here, predation banned in 5-mile ring. Weapons holstered during neutral hours. We gave the woods a line and asked the woods to back us up. At the 10 check-in, Echo Flight's voice came steady. Exchange Echo, herd maps updated, slow migration trending from Cooksburg north-northwest, mill on autocycle again. We had learned that sirens stuck on repeat draw walkers for days. That gave us a window to adjust our lure cans and oil drip clackers so pressure stayed off the fence line and on the wrong people. I logged the drift and chalked a note on the board by the door. A place that listens makes fewer sudden moves. By mid-morning, Ledger crew came up the path with clean hands and tired feet. 2 men, 1 woman, packs low and ropes neat. The woman, Sienna, counted out stamped tokens slow and deliberate and set a jar of mixed screws on our table like an offering. Route 36. Bus is pushed into a V across the bend, she said. Not friendly. Somebody wants meat to run into the tip. Stay off it. She pointed on our map. We nodded, and we adjusted the chalk road marks that show green lanes and red ones. When scavengers do you a kindness and you live because of it, the word looter lands in your mouth differently. We had weeks like that. Work, weather, walkers that drifted across the far fence and lost interest when wind told them nothing worth chasing lived here. A trader day where Spillway brought ice blocks wrapped in canvas, and we traded lye and half a spares kit for their turbine gaskets. Erin ran a basic clinic under the canvas they erected, and Lena handled sanitizer little refills, like a bartender with a long line. When Echo Flight read the names of a handful of kids who had joined their camp across the water and asked if we could spare soap and seed, we did. They sent a spare NVG monocular and a case of field dressings a week later with a note that didn't make a fuss. The quiet was not a promise. Ledger crew dropped a name and a habit at neutral hour. A group calling themselves Chainmen were working north, collecting tolls from anyone pulling something worth taking and trying on camps the way a bully tries doors. They sent a scout within sight of our warning board. The scout didn't read well. He put his hand on the palisade and tested the lashings with the kind of pressure men with allies use. He left when Cal stepped into the lane and let the crossbow's limbs make their quiet line in the air. The next morning we found the scuff marks in the gravel where he had stood and 2 fresh prints leading east. We didn't turn the radio into an alarm. We turned it into a plan. Echo Flight caught a burst on their set 2 nights later. Quiet sign camp. Probe next fog. 3 teams. Rope and hook. It was ugly radio, but we didn't need poetry. We needed time. We asked Spillway to host our elders and 2 teenagers with good hands and new nerves. They agreed to take them for a week under their canvas, in exchange for a crate of hardware we'd been saving for a day when giving was smarter than keeping. Mark and Harker took Becky to the ridge and set a little repeater box he'd built into a weather-tight case. It would give us voice when the valley swallowed sound. Omar and I shifted 2 runs of concertina into a J-shape along the inner fence, so any breach would fold a reckless person into a pocket we knew better than they did. Cal and Sienna walked 3 sound lure points upwind, set the oil drip clackers to the slow pace that plays to walkers more than men, and used wire to tune the little rattle that says, "There's trouble that direction," to ears that don't think about direction. We replaced the old screw boards along a likely sprint lane and painted the heads in mud so sunshine didn't give them away. We staged smoke canisters, not to blind men. Blind men shoot anything, but to hide our doors from people who think entries are their birthright. The scout probe came at dusk the next day. It had the feel of men who had done this elsewhere and liked their odds. 4 figures approached from the right, 2 from the left, hooks slung, rope coiled at the waist with that practiced flick that says someone taught them how to throw lines over edges in a life that used to have ladders. They moved quiet like men who had been punished for being loud. They tested the palisade and whispered. The can line answered with a clink a raccoon might make. Fingers worked at knots. When the first rope bit wood, Cal put a bolt into the post near those fingers, and the man took his hand away fast as if the wood had learned to bite back. One of them raised a pistol at the sound. Harker answered with 2 measured shots, spaced the way he taught, and the rest did the math and carried their wounded away. They left a rucksack because a man who believes the next try will be easy drops weight he should keep. The bag had chalk, hooks, and a badly drawn map of our fence. I copied it. Then I fed the paper to the stove. We returned the message without writing a human into it. We posted the charter at the road fork on clean board. Exchange here, neutral hours, no predation in 5 miles. Violators banned. A signature line with our token stamp at the bottom told a kind of truth men like that understand. You can make rules with your mouth. Better to make them with wood people can point at. Ledger crew kept their end and lured a portion of the slow herd into the timber on the 3rd day. They didn't lead them toward us. They led them toward the second approach lane the chainmen liked, and then stepped aside. The herd didn't run. It never does. It drifted and confused men who had expected a clean shot at a fence. Echo Flight sent 2 advisors who stayed at Harker's shoulder and said little besides hold and now. We didn't turn it into a war. We turned their plan into a mess. Smoke hid our doors from men who like to find doors. LED floods lit only the pocket we wanted them in and never cut light across our faces. The J-shape did what geometry does when a man relies on muscle and finds he has chosen a curve that gives him nowhere useful to go. A chainman's hook grabbed wire and became a lever pointed at his friend's ribs. Boots hit our screw boards and their bodies stopped trusting their own legs. Someone on their side fired into the confusion and announced himself to everything that listens for that kind of noise. Walkers that had drifted nearby pattern, not purpose, moved toward the call the way water finds a ditch. Gate, Becky called from the bridge, which meant 2 hands on the rope and a plank we'd drop if anyone with a bright idea suddenly had feet to match it. Quiet, I answered, which meant wait for the line to slacken and don't make a new problem with an old fix. A pair tried to run the outer lane and found Sienna's drop wire. They chose the river rather than the screw boards and let cold make its own argument. We held fire when backs turned, and only shot when turned faces and raised guns left us no other language to speak. When the pocket emptied, the men who weren't swimming ran the road. None of ours chased. None of ours stood tall for a cheer. We went through the numbers, took what weapons they abandoned, stabilized 1 man who put both hands up and kept them there, and turned 2 over to Spillway for work that would pay down their ration debt under eyes not ours. After, the woods felt bigger. We slept harder that night and shorter, like people who understand that sleep is a tool with a purpose, not a reward. In the morning, we ran lessons with the kids who come on trade days. How to set a hand on a post to read if the wood is asking for oil. How to walk gravel lanes without telling on yourself. How to hold a knot in your palm until you can tie it with your eyes closed. Mark taught a quiet talk on voltage, sockets, and why batteries age. Becky ran a map game that turned people into landmarks and had the little ones call out how to get from the lodge to the eelgrass bend without crossing a line they shouldn't. Echo Flight ran a clinic under canvas. Minor wounds, a look at 2 bad knees, a pair of lungs they asked to listen to again next week. The ledger crew stood by the warning board with their hands empty, showing others it wasn't a trap. They paid their tokens and left with soap and a small bundle of sutures for a friend down the road who had messed up a woodsaw cut. The Spillway folks brought ice that sang against our metal bowls and fish smoked firm over hardwood. We gave them lie and a promise of 2 guard shifts when the river walkers begin gathering at dusk in a few days. Not all days filled like that. Some were just work. Reset the bridge lines, adjust the lure cans, clean the rifle that never fired, and thank it for not needing to. Walk the line with the NVG at night and scribble chalk notes in the day. We ate venison thin and rice careful and talked about nothing heavy because the fence likes it when people do their chores and don't turn every meal into a staff meeting. When rain came, we caught it. When wind picked up, we checked guy lines. When you think a place has stopped needing you, it's usually because you haven't looked. The last sharp test didn't announce itself with speeches. It started with the smell of something not wood burning far down the road, and a flicker that wasn't lightning. 2 figures came quick, low and wrong, chainman Splinter, trying to torch the outer fence with jars that glimmered in the light. The tripwire flare punched red into the trees and made distances honest. Lena put a bolt through a bottle before it met wood, and Harker ended the man lifting a second jar. The other dropped his, and tried to run a lane we had written for him a month ago. The gravel he chose told us he'd been here before. The gravel told him he needed different shoes. He fell. Cal reached him first and took his weapon. No speeches. We stamped a band token and tied it to his collarbone with paracord in front of him, then walked him to the road to choose spillway work or the long path. He chose work. The river listened and returned to its regular conversation. Forest Exchange Charter, the board at the road says now, with simple rules that can live in a head. Neutral hours, 5-mile no predation ring, token salvage, basic aid for those who obey, disputes heard by 3, hollow, spillway, echo. We read it on the radio twice a week like a forecast. People repeat it back. People argue with pieces of it. People still show up because rules written down feel different than promises made by men who like hearing themselves. I still hunt. I take the crossbow on soft mornings when fog licks the grass. The 308 when I need to reach and make the reach stand. I pick lines along the Clarion where the river tucks its cold against the cut bank and trout wait for my patience. I cut sign where deer soften ground under hemlock and decide whether I'm hunting or sharing. I keep my face quiet when the woods put old ghosts in new clothes. I don't walk the camp at night to enjoy the view. I walk it to be sure the ropes do what ropes have been asked to do. We took Echo Flight a sack of seeds and a stack of patched gloves. They gave us a coil of wire, a small ring binder of medical field notes that Erin reads like scripture, and a plastic crate of MRE heaters that made a winter day taste like someone had a plan. Harker took a morning to go over casualty collection again. Not because we needed to, but because repetition makes panic a stranger when it tries to visit. Stop the leak, move to cover, talk short, move again, he said, and wrote it on our wall, because walls have better memory than adrenaline. Lena came back from Spillway with a new way of reading water the carpenters there had learned. Listening to the edge of a pipe with a stick and feeling for the song of a bearing that wants to fail. She turned that trick into a way of listening for knot creak in our bridge line and taught it to Mark. He now taps rope with the back of his fingernails and knows when a strand is writing cracks into our future. We still talk about the 3 stones under the beach. On quiet evenings, after the radio goes down for the night, we sit and clean tools and say their names out loud because memory is a defense too. Loss didn't stop happening because we wrote rules. It just learned where to stand. When a cough moves through the camp now, the isolation tent goes up without complaint. Masks get worn, buckets get labeled, bleach gets mixed to the same lines. Erin and Lena don't let sympathy turn into shortcuts. The rest of us don't turn into experts because we saw someone do a job once. The market day we planned with Echo and Spillway arrived on a cool morning with a sky the color of clean metal. People came on foot with their palms short of pockets to show they weren't pretending to be friends with hands closed over problems. We set tables under old canvas. Smoked fish, soap, vinegar, wire, seed packets folded with care, chargers with little lines of tape marking when they were free and when they were owed. A kid from Ledger Crew stood in line with a cracked set of headphones and left with them taped and working. An older man from the dam brought us a bag of small bearings because he found our chalk mark on his map and decided help should travel both ways. We charged radios in half-hour windows and let the waiting be the conversation. Someone told a joke that wasn't funny because it was too true. People still laughed because relief likes a soft target. We kept the warning stakes where they are. They do their job without gloating. We hung a second sign next to them on clean board that doesn't rot fast. Forest exchange. Rules posted. Come correct. No skulls. No horns. Men who need theater rarely build lasting things. The road past the stakes carries people with tools in their hands and a plan in their pocket. The ones who don't like reading turn around before the gravel changes color. A voice on the radio reads poem lines some nights. A short habit from someone with more breath than job. Another reads birthdays for kids who will never see a cake lit like it used to be. And it still matters to hear your day said out loud. I don't turn the dial away. The woods hum, and the wire hums, and the world that's left is small enough to carry with the right shoulder. I teach Mark's crew the way I wish someone had taught me. Slowly, without shouting, without breaking their will just to prove mine. We go over things until hands do them right without needing to think. How to fold a tarp so the wind doesn't turn it into a sail. How to hang a can line so it sings when touched but doesn't scream. How to wash hands like it matters, because out here it does. How to talk into a radio like every second costs you something. How to end a fight before it turns stupid, and how to walk away from one started by pride instead of planning. I don't test loyalty. I test whether they remember the difference between being loud and being clear. When the last of the light thins, we bring the plank up with one practiced pull. The rope slides over the pulley in a small whisper that belongs here now, the way old pine and oilcloth belong. The river keeps moving under us without asking permission, saying the same few syllables it has always said. We work the routine without ceremony, check the tie-downs, sweep what doesn't belong outside, shade the lamp so night doesn't take more than it should. The can lines hang quiet. In the trees, something shifts and then holds. Maybe a deer testing the narrow path we left open on purpose. Maybe just wind pretending to be more important than it is. Out past the ridges, the walkers move wherever wind suggests. Sometimes they brush our edges and pass along. Sometimes they drift toward people who trust tall fences more than good habits. This time the quiet didn't last. One bottle ticked once and went still, the kind of sound a bird might make landing on a wire. Lena froze. Mark lifted the crossbow but didn't sight in. We waited. 3 figures stepped onto the gravel bar upstream, clothes dark with river spray, shoes heavy with silt, heads turning toward the warm air that leaks from any lived-in place at dusk. The water was low enough to let them wade the shallows, and the current nudged them toward our trail like a hand on a shoulder. We let them come to the warning stakes, close enough to read our lines, not close enough to learn our doors. The first leaned on a post, testing wood with the weight any person would use, trying a handle that shouldn't open. I set a bolt and took the bright spot behind its ear, where bone sits shallow. It folded without a sound. Mark put a second bolt clean into the next one and stepped left, already reaching for a third until he saw Lena's hand palm down. Hold. The last figure turned at the noise of its friends meeting the ground and wandered toward the riverbank. Cal slipped from the blind at the pump house corner, used the pike we keep there to guide it toward the water, and let the current reclaim what it had delivered. We reset the line, fetched our bolts, and raked the gravel to lose the story. No speeches. No rush. Work finished before dark carries less tomorrow. That was the lesson again. Out here, the forest shields you if you let it. Trees baffle sound. Slope steals speed. Water tells you what's coming long before it arrives. The roads and the city blocks we grew up trusting turn threats into funnels and turn noise into a magnet. We've seen it. A single shout in town brings more trouble than a whole camp's worth of footsteps under these branches, and people remain the sharper risk. Walkers push by accident. People test on purpose. The next morning, while I checked the west corner, I found a single stack of 3 flat stones set too neat to be wind. A human mark. The kind sent ahead of hands that like to take. We left a reply of our own. Our charter board moved 2 yards closer to the road, and our path brushed smooth so boot prints would show their arrogance early. If someone wanted lanes and loudness, they could have the highway. The forest keeps those who earn it. We started calling this the season of mended things. The river fell back and revealed stone ledges we hadn't seen since snowmelt. We walked the line and fixed what months of weather and shoes had leaned out of square. Omar swapped the generator's old plug for one that won't arc in damp, and slid the whole unit deeper under a tarp baffle so rain speaks louder than metal when it runs. Mark pulled each guy line and retied with knots that turn loose when you ask and never sooner. Lena took inventory in the med bin, tracing labels with one finger and circling the antibiotics with a quiet pen stroke that meant we were too thin for comfort. We added disinfectant to the list, plus masks and saline. On the south path, we found someone had snipped a lure can off its line and pocketed the hook for later. People notice what works and repurpose it for worse. We replaced it, higher this time, and left a tiny ribbon of cloth that would tell us if a human hand tried again. Right after sunset, the river gave us a choice. A shout carried from the far bank, not loud, but shaped like words. We killed the lamp and listened. A lone figure stood knee-deep in the shallows, pushing at the current with a branch and glancing back toward two shapes pacing the tree line behind him. Not fast, not clever, just close enough to make mistakes contagious. We don't invite risk, but we don't ignore solvable problems either. I dropped the plank halfway and locked the side pin. Lena took the far corner with the rifle, not to write noise into the night, but to make sure no one followed him onto our boards. Mark flaked out a throw line and sent it clean. The man grabbed with both hands and let us haul him across while the walkers shuffled at the water's lip, unwilling to commit where footing argues back. When he reached our side, he kept his eyes on the ground and said thank you with the kind of voice that knows it doesn't get to ask for more. We gave him the hand wash bucket and a place by the post while we watched the river erase the problem for us. He slept outside the inner fence and left at first light with a canteen and a map sketch that showed a bad bend on Route 36 where people had been playing toll booth with a bus. The forest had done its part. The road had done its usual. We went back to mending. The little jobs filled the big gaps. I sharpened the mower scythe for the paths. Omar reseated a hinge on the shed door, and Becky chalked a thin X where the fence dips so anyone walking the line at night would feel the warning underfoot. Inside, Lena rewrote the med sheet, neat script that holds steady even when the day doesn't. Antibiotics stood there like a word we were saying too often without the supplies to back it up. I closed the notebook, looked at the wall we reserve for orders that matter, and wrote a single word where no one could miss it in the morning. Clinic. Becky returned from a scout run with a small folded note tucked in her jacket sleeve. It had the dry smell of something that had been pocketed too long. She said she passed through Marionville and spotted a pharmacy with its metal shutters still down, and a side wall that used to be bricked in, now showing daylight through cracked mortar. According to her, the ledger crew skipped it last month. The front was too loud, and the alley reeked like something was watching. She drew the building layout in charcoal on the old cutting board and tapped at one point with her nail. Here, she said, 2 pry spots. If it's empty, we lose an hour. If it's not, if there's still stock, we bring back a winter. We moved with 3, me, Becky and Cal, crossbow and 308, 2 pry bars, a small hammer wrapped in cloth, a roll of duct tape, masks, and a box of gallon bags. We took the long way through Cook Forest State Park, keeping the Clarion off our left shoulder, then cut north past the old fire tower where the stairs rust into stories. We saw 3 walkers in the hardwoods, all moving the same indifferent line, heads tilting to sounds the wind refused to make for them. We let them keep their meeting. Marionville wore the look towns wear when people leave before they admit they've left. The pharmacy sat on a corner near a laundromat with a sign for dollar dries. The front shutter showed pry marks where somebody had tried impatience and gotten boredom in return. We went to the alley. The brick door had a patch the size of a shoebox where mortar failed, and time took the win. I tapped low, patient, listening for the hollow. Cal set the pry bar, Becky braced the bottom, and we worked in small bites. The brick gave with a soft grind. We eased it into a stack where it wouldn't tell on us. Inside smelled like paper and something sharper. We moved with tape on the soles of our boots to keep grit from writing our steps. Back room, then aisle ends, then the counter. We didn't read labels for brand names. We read active ingredients. Amoxicillin, doxycycline, a partial sleeve of azithromycin, 3 bottles of cough syrup that hadn't turned into sugar, gauze, tape, saline, a compact pulse ox. Becky slipped into her pocket like treasure. We didn't strip shelves. We took what our list asked for and left the empty space that keeps a place from becoming a siren. A figure turned into the alley while we were still in the back room. Slow, shoes whispering on grit, the sound of palms touching metal like it was learning the shape of doors again. We froze, until its shadow moved along and out of view. Becky touched the counter once, a small ritual, then we left the way we came. The bricks stacked back enough to slow anyone who followed our footprints without knowing why. Back at Exchange Hollow, Lena set the bottles out in the light, read dates, and wrote doses on tape with thick pen so night wouldn't turn numbers into guesses. Erin logged the lot on the wall. Harker nodded once and went back to cleaning a bolt with a cloth that looked too old to still be this useful. We ate late and quiet and let the camp feel like a chest finally let to exhale. Spillway called for hands the next week. Their turbine bearing had begun to sing, and men who know water don't ignore songs like that. We sent Mark, Omar and me. The Tionesta spillway wore mist and sunlight like a coat, the concrete warm under our palms, where we leaned to look at the rig. The bearing cage showed a hairline, not open, but thinking about it. Omar brought out an old mechanic's trick, lay a screwdriver tip on metal and put ear to handle. The vibration told a small truth. We swapped the part while Mark wiped everything with lint-free cloth and bagged the old cage so someone could scavenge it for a lesson. The co-op paid in ice and a handful of small bearings from their own stash. We took turns on the evening watch there and listened to water argue with gravity. Walker shapes drifted along the far bank, unhurried, and moved on when they learned the slope had no conversation for them. Echo Flight's voice came shallow one morning, and then stronger. Exchange Echo, we're cutting one bird into a static power island. Sending Medtrainer next neutral hour. Copy? We copied. When their medic arrived on foot with 2 rucks and a smile that looked like the kind that gets people through tough jobs, Erin and Lena built a one-day clinic out of our tables and canvas. They taught stop the bleed with belts and sticks, wrote mixing ratios on card, and ran drills until hands stopped shaking and started repeating. I took notes like a student and added them to the wall where we keep words that change outcomes. Ledger crew earned their place that month by turning a corner nobody knew needed turning. They found a stalled school bus near PA 36 that traders had been skirting for weeks. The bus didn't hold children. It held wire, tools, and old books someone had packed for a move that never happened. They brought us a crate of insulated pliers and walked away with seed and a small bag of rice without asking for the extra, which is how trust grows a half-inch in hard soil. When it rained hard, the river rose and made us remember why our bridge has 3, not 2 anchor points. The water took a tree past our bend and tried to teach the plank a song. We let out a foot of line, then another, and hummed with it instead of against it. After, we walked the bank, found where the water had eaten, and refilled with rock until the river agreed to leave that edge alone again. We pulled 3 fish from the back eddy and ate them with salt and a squeeze of lemon that had been a surprise in a trade 2 weeks back. Mark ate slow and smiled like he had been told a good secret. Chainmen, or what was left of them, tried to prove they were still a noun. They sprung an ambush on Ledger crew 3 bends past the market road, hiding behind a pile of old fence posts like kids who never learned that cover and concealment are 2 different languages. The radio took the call. Becky heard it and clipped her voice down to the bare message. Help, 2 down, road bend by Birch Stand. We moved with 4. Me, Lena, Harker, Cal. No sirens, no shouting. We came in from the creek side, low and slow, and let their posture do the talking. One had his back to us, looking the wrong way. Harker tapped the stock against the trunk once. The man turned half toward the sound and half toward a future he didn't get. We stopped the fight as small as it would go. 2 survivors surrendered. One ran limping down a lane we'd salted with those little screwboards last month. He fell and stayed down long enough to remember that speed without plan is a story other people tell. We disarmed them, bandaged Ledger's wound with what we'd learned, and sent the chainmen splinter down river with band tokens stamped and hung where everyone would see what they had chosen. We held a quiet memorial a few days later when the air smelled like cut grass. Jer's stone got a new coat of oil so his name shines when the light hits it. Noah's chisel marks looked deeper, or maybe my eyes wanted them deeper. Tasha's place had a ring of smooth pebbles Ruth had placed with neat hands. We didn't speak long. We said the 3 names, and then went back to work. If there's dignity in a place, it comes from what gets done after you've said what needed saying. The long nights arrived without asking for advice. Frost came on the grass like a letter you recognize before you open it. We moved the root cellar stores forward on the ledger, checked seals, rotated jars, and put the older things closer to the hand. Omar built a small rocket stove from cinder blocks for the work area so you could warm fingers without lighting the big barrel. Mark built a box around the power board that kept small winds from snuffing big changes. Lena set vinegar bottles by the hand wash buckets and drew the mixing ratio on the wall, where even a sleepy person could trust their hand to measure what the wind had frozen. Not everything stayed tidy. A cough walked through the camp again, lighter than last winter but rude all the same. We raised the isolation canvas, marked the entry line with red tape, and went back to masks for indoor chores. Erin took temps and wrote them without sentiment. Lena mixed sanitizer in single batches so waste never set a trap for us. Mark tuned the radio down a notch and taped a small sign on it. Listen more, speak less. For a week, the camp moved like a person protecting a sprained ankle. Still functional, just careful. We lost no one. The way relief shows up around here is that someone makes coffee slowly and offers the tin of hard candy without counting. Winter teaches small lessons every day. Snow writes stories you don't want written. We swept our paths at odd angles so a stranger couldn't read our routine. We pulled the tripwires down when ice made them sing in gusts and set little strips of cloth instead, light enough to show movement without telling on us every time a squirrel did its job. The 308 stayed oiled and silent most days. The crossbow got new strings. The axe handles took oil and returned a low shine that says, "Someone cares about next year." A storm dropped in from the northwest and turned the trees into lines of graphite. We pulled the bridge plank fully up and tied it off in 2 places. We set the lures low so wind wouldn't make too big a song. A section of palisade gave under a top-heavy drift. We shored it with a T-post and a good word, and promised it better attention when the weight came off. In the morning, we found walker prints in the drift along the fence. They moved a few steps, stopped, turned, and wandered until the wind filled their story in. We scraped ice from the pump handle and filled buckets until our breath made steam, then stopped because waste looks like victory when you're trying to look busy. Echo Flight used the quiet to run a short school. Harker and their 2 advisors took Mark and Becky and Cal on a calm patrol loop, teaching spacing, silent signals, and how to take a knee without landing in something that will put a smell in your pants for the rest of the day. Lena and Erin ran another clinic under canvas, frost nip, hot water bottles under armpits and groin, never directly on skin, and the way to rewarm fingers that think they've changed their minds about belonging to you. We wrote more lines on the wall. The wall is beginning to look like a mailing list for a better future. On a night so clear you could count stars you didn't believe in, the radio carried a recitation from someone down toward Oil City. Lines about winter, patience, and the way a house learns your name when you close its door for the 1,000th time. We stood around the small stove and let our boots dry and didn't talk much. When the voice stopped, the woods made their own poem. Branches ticking, ice settling, a fox complaining about the business of mice. We raised the plank and turned down the light and trusted the work we'd done. By late winter, we were tired of soups and grateful for any bite that cracked like a promise. Ruth opened a jar of pickles she'd hidden from herself and shared like someone tithing to a better season. Becky traded a set of spare laces for a book of maps and then spent 2 nights memorizing road lines she hopes never to set foot on. Omar rebuilt a carb so clean you could see the future in its float bowl. I showed Mark how to cut a field for seed saving, not harvest, and he nodded like a kid listening to how to hold a chisel on his first day in a shop. Spring comes hymning and hawing here. The snow doesn't leave, it negotiates. We started early on the palisade fix, so summer wouldn't find us claiming we were waiting for better weather. We set a new row of posts with plates that bite deeper and lashed horizontal runs, so wind had to work for any win. Cal marked 2 new lure points upwind because the herd maps showed a curve back toward us as a mill siren near Lipa finally died. Walkers go where the song is. If you change the song, they change their plan. Spillway asked for 2 nights of eyes. We sent 4. The river walkers gathered at dusk in threes and fives, and came to the concrete edge the way fish come to a lighted dock. They paced, lost interest, forgot, remembered, and paced again. On the second night, two men with bad timing tried to peel a coil of cable from the rail. Becky coughed once the way a teacher does in a rowdy room. They froze, put the cable down, and left the way they came, hands visible. We don't need more enemies. We need fewer bad decisions. Ledger crew arrived one morning with a rig they'd fashioned from a jogging stroller, a pannier, and optimism. They'd brought copper wire wound into neat circles, a bag of mixed screws we didn't waste a grin on, and a small sack of coffee someone had kept for birthdays, and finally traded because birthdays without company felt wrong. We swapped lye, paracord, and 2 small jars of pickled beans for it. We brewed a pot on the small rocket stove and took it black and slow, each sip an agreement to keep trying. We did see the slow ones in numbers again toward the end of that spring. Not a wall, a tide that never learns the beach. They brushed the outer fence and kept walking when the lure's clack told them to look elsewhere. One caught itself on a hanger of wire and rocked until it stilled. We took it from the wire and put it in the pit we've used when necessary. We don't make a show of that. We just do it before wind makes a joke we can't afford. We closed the loop with a market day that looked almost like something a child might draw if they were asked what a world could be. Tables under the same old canvas, ice from spillway in a tub, soap from our kettle run, wire and seed on a board, a little tin of screws that wouldn't matter in any other life and mattered like gold here. Echo Flight ran a clinic and put a splint on a wrist some kid had pretended wasn't broken. Ledger crew stood in line with tokens and got sutures and didn't look over their shoulders while they did it. A woman from downriver read 2 lines from a pocket paper while a pot simmered, and the sun wrote complicated math through the leaves. When the day ended, we cleaned with vinegar, packed the tables, and hung the hand wash buckets with fresh tape lines. We counted tokens. We counted rounds. We counted jars. We counted breaths without writing any of them down, and then wrote down the things that needed writing. Noise buys time. Time saves ammo. Ammo saves people. I printed it again, and found a corner of the wall we hadn't used yet. The wall is almost full. We'll start a new one when it is. That night, I walked the fence and pressed a palm to a post I set with Mark when he was smaller. The wood felt dry and committed. The wire hummed where metal hums in good weather. Beyond the river, something moved in brush, and it was a deer, not a man, and I let it be what it was. I looked at the warning board and the exchange sign beside it, and tried to see them as they are, not as I worry they might be. One tells the bad story not to start. One tells the good story how to find the door. Summer settled in like a worker who doesn't waste motion. We laid out beds along the south edge, where the old RV still blocked the road. Ruth pushed for potatoes and beans first, calories before flavor, and I followed her lead. We dug trenches with shovels that had survived 3 handles and set seed in rows a child could count. Mark stretched drip lines from a rain barrel and used a siphon to prime the run. Lena tucked basil and kale close to the cabin wall, where reflected heat would lengthen their day. We set a small patch for 3 sisters, corn, beans, squash, because some patterns carry old wisdom even when you think you've invented something new. The river looked content until it didn't. Thunder rolled along the hills for half a day, and then the clarion came up in a hurry, brown and busy, taking branches and old arguments down with it. The first foot of rise just made the rocks talk different. The second foot changed the bridge plank's tone. By the third, the upriver anchor line soared at its cleat. We lowered the plank to relieve strain and clipped a spare line to an oak that had ignored 100 such years. Omar set a come-along, ratcheting the strap smooth 1 click at a time. The plank stopped complaining and started listening. We built a low wall of sandbags along the shed door and moved anything that hated water up onto shelves. The pump handle wore a new rope because wet hands forgive fewer mistakes. Becky and Cal stacked wood in tight cords so it would breathe, not float. Erin put the medkit on the table and laid towels beside it without drama. Harker stood at the bridge with the radio handset while Lena and I walked the bank with poles, pushing logs toward the far eddy to keep them from battering our posts. We didn't yell. We didn't guess. We let the work lower the noise in the head. Spillway came up on the set as the rain eased. Exchange spillway. Flood crest expected in 6 hours. Then steady fall. Watch your right bank eddy by the Alder. It'll steal anything not tied. We tied everything. We added a third lashing to the pallet stack and a fourth to the plank. The river peaked before midnight and slid back down like it had finally remembered its shape. At first light, the clearing wore a border of debris, bark, weeds, bottles that used to matter. We sorted what could be used and burned or buried the rest. The plank's main bolt took a new cotter pin. The oak earned another line in the ledger where we record what lasts. The garden loved the flood more than we did. It drank deep and pushed green like it had something to prove. We thinned rows and argued softly about how many peppers count as overconfidence. Ruth ran string between stakes so beans could climb without smothering the neighbors. Mark checked the battery box each morning and logged the voltage at the same hour so the chart told truth. Lena fermented a small batch of cabbage and wrote the date large on tape, because time slips when days all give you the same kind of tired. Echo Flight hiked in with 2 crates and 3 trainers and asked if we wanted a 2-day skills swap. We set canvas in the shade and moved benches. They taught a patient class on spotting before shooting and sent us through drills that made space the priority instead of score. Harker added a block on casualty carry using belts like handles, and even the smallest person could do it after 3 tries. Lena and Erin ran a counterclass. Water testing, bleach math, when to isolate, when to open a tent flap for morale, when to leave it shut. We finished each day with a shared meal under the big pine, MRE sides, next to our beans and venison, coffee traded for talk that didn't waste itself. Ledger crew kept to the charter and made it useful. They marked 2 dead ends in Tionesta with chalk on the old brick where tourists used to stop. They left a small bundle of copper on our porch with a tag, Debt Paid, S. We added 2 bottles of soap to the trade box with a note of our own. The road learned new traffic. When strangers stepped under the warning board and saw both signs, the one that said where the line is and the one that said this is a place to trade, they behaved like the forest was finally handing out a map. The last challenge came in heat, not cold. 3 men and a woman arrived outside neutral hours, hands empty but eyes already measuring. They didn't call themselves chainmen, but they wore that same habit of pushing as if courtesy was a limited resource. They studied the palisade and the bridge and the way our shadow lines fell, then asked to inspect the exchange to ensure fairness for neighboring districts. The word districts didn't belong to this century anymore. We declined the inspection. We offered neutral hour tomorrow and pointed at the board. They didn't like reading. The leader set his boot on the bottom slat and leaned with a smile meant for small offenses. He didn't see the low glass bottle line at his shin until it chimed. A second figure drifted to the right where a gap had once existed. It didn't exist anymore. He found concertina with his trouser hem and stepped back. The woman stayed outside of arm's reach and watched like a person who has learned to count assets fast. Exchange starts at dawn, I said. No inspection tonight. Hands washed, holstered and open. You walk in under rules or you don't walk in. If you want to talk about fairness, bring someone who knows a ledger. They weighed the scene and chose to linger. Becky fetched down the big board from the shed and set it on 2 sawhorses just inside the fence, angled so the road could read it. The Forest Exchange Charter was there in neat paint. Under it, 3 token stamps. Ours, Spillways, Echoes, left their seal. Harker took a step and stood where his shadow fell on the word, no predation. Erin came with a hand wash bucket and set it down carefully like you set down a word you want heard. The leader tried one more soft shove with his voice. You can't hold this forever, he said. People will come. That's the point, Lena answered. They already do. It could have gone bad. It didn't. Not because we drew first or shouted louder, but because the shape of the place told a story their plan didn't fit. They left at sundown with faces that promised they'd test the edges again. We slept in shifts and moved breakfast an hour early. They returned at dawn, on time for neutral hours, and this time with packs to trade. The woman did the talking. She laid out a clean spread, spare batteries, a map case, a sewing kit intact, like someone who understands how to start over. We measured out soap and vinegar. They took their share, left tokens, washed hands, and went down the road without looking back too often. Sometimes the fence teaches harder than a speech. The garden came on in waves. We pulled potatoes that felt like paying yourself back. We sliced squash into bracelets and dried them on screens. We ate the first tomato like a ceremony. Salt pinched neat, 3 bites each. Ruth saved seed heads with the same reverence Lena saved antibiotics. Mark built a simple solar dryer from scrap and a pane we had pulled from the ranger's shed years ago. It worked enough to matter. At night, when breath fogged less, we sat on the low wall and let the sound of the river write a line across the end of the day. The slow ones still came. They stepped out of tree lines and changed nothing by doing it. We adjusted lures before dusk and tuned them after dawn. When one wandered too close to the inner fence and lingered on human scent, we ended the problem with the tool that fit the distance. We dug when we had to and burned when we had to, and we did it before wind made neighbors share more than recipes. These are jobs, not performances. News spread, not rumors, the right kind of news. Echo Flight announced Forest Exchange Corridor on their evening net, with coordinates that matched the chalk marks we'd been making for a year. Spillway added our neutral hours to their signboard and a small bell for entry. Ledger crew started sending runners ahead when big hauls were coming so we could plan the water and not choke our own lines. A boy from downriver traded a hand-carved spoon for a turn on the charger and left with 2 new words, token and ledger, and a grin that borrowed from before. We made one more run to the old depot to pull the last tarp and leave the site bare for whatever wanted it next. We took down our mark, folded the canvas, and left a board nailed in place with nothing on it but a date. In another life I might have written a sentence. Now I know better. Empty wood reads clearest to those who need to listen. We closed the summer with a market larger than any we'd hosted, tables under canvas, chalk arrows on the ground that children drew with care. Echo ran a clinic. Spillway set a tub where ice water made hands ache in a grateful way. Ledger brought neat coils of wire. New faces brought jars of applesauce and walked away with soap and a lesson on water. We kept to neutral hours, and we meant it. A man tried to haggle with impatience and found nobody had the time to buy his hurry. He changed his tone or he ate alone. He changed it. The next storm spared the river and this fence. The one after that took 3 feet of wall at the far corner where roots had done slow damage. We cut new posts and set them deeper, with stone backfill instead of sand, and tied in a horizontal brace that made the line hold straight. Mark measured angles while I tamped. Lena wrote route watch on the calendar's fall page so we'd check that corner after leaf drop every year. The camp remembers for you if you train it. Autumn turned the ridge the color of old copper. We dug and hung. We smoked and sealed. We saved seed. We set aside a crate for winter strangers who would arrive empty because winter convinces even stubborn men that rules make sense. We stamped tokens for the cold months and tucked them in a tin with silica gel like precious things. The bridge got a new rub rail, the rope a new splice, and the pulley a squirt of oil and a small thanks. On the last warm evening before the air started to bite, we held a council without using the word. Echo sent 2 walkers with straight backs and a tool roll. Spillway sent a woman with strong hands and grease under her nails. Ledger sent Sienna with a book for notes and a pencil she kept behind her ear. We stood under the big pine and read the charter aloud. We added one line, children cross first. We stamped new boards with our 3 marks and set them at the forks where people have to choose between the old world and this one. Lena brewed coffee from the precious bag Ledger had traded and watered it just enough to make it last without turning it into an apology. We passed tin cups. Harker said little and then said the thing that needed saying. Guns last longer when words do their job. He set the rifle down not because he believed in magic circles, but because he believed in posture. Others followed. The forest listened like it always does, indifferent and generous. Winter came again. We were ready without pretending. Preparation is a shield against everything. We caught the first flakes on our sleeves and went inside before we felt noble. The wall had less room for words. We started a second board and pinned a clean sheet where new hands could start their lists. The warning stakes stood at the road, weathered and plain. The exchange sign beside them shone where we'd oiled it to keep the letters from bleeding in the snow. A boy born in another camp took his first steps in ours, hands out, a laugh that made people look up from measuring and cleaning and think about summer instead of counting jars. A woman who had walked alone too long allowed her pack to rest against our wall while she ate a bowl of stew and told Becky 2 towns to avoid because the doors there still pretend to open for strangers. A pair of older men argued about knot names while their fingers agreed. We set out extra bowls on the shelf by the door. Not charity, inventory. One night the radio carried a list of names read slow, then a line from a book about neighbors who turned into something better because the road cornered them. I didn't know the voice and I didn't need to. We answered with our hourly call and signed off with a simple exchange standing by. It felt right to be a place people could say aloud like a route on a map. When I think about the first days, smoke on the horizon, quiet stores, rope pulled through hands that didn't yet own these calluses, I don't see victory. I see 1,000 small choices made in a row. Pull the plank or lower it. Drop the wire or leave it up. Trade or hold. Talk or keep the air clear. The infected didn't get faster or smarter. They stayed a slow weather. We learned the winds. The living got clever and sometimes cruel. Enough learned there was a better way to stay. I still check the fence at night. I still count steps to the bridge with my eyes closed. I still lay out meals like a ledger and say no to the second scoop more often than yes. But now, some mornings, I walk the line and hear a kid rehearsing a radio call without being told. A woman humming while she seals a jar. A man teaching the word splice to someone who will use it. The camp makes a low song when it's healthy. It takes work to keep it in tune. It's worth the work. The river still moves, steady and slow, like it always has. The bridge comes up easy when we need it to. The palisade leans a little now, not from damage, just from time settling in. The warning stakes don't need checking every day anymore. The ground around them remembers what they mean. The sign we hung out front still reads, "Exchange Hollow." It's weathered, a little crooked, but it still stands. And when strangers come down the path, they walk in with their eyes open and their hands visible. Not because we threaten them, but because this place earned respect the hard way. You want to know what a good ending looks like out here? It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's a day where the radio just crackles with the same old voices at the same old times, where the beans come up in rows and the market wraps up without anyone raising their voice, where you hear someone laugh while sweeping dust back into place like it matters. It's someone raising the bridge at night without even thinking about it and another lighting the porch lantern, because that's just how evenings go. It's the list still pinned to the wall in the morning, and knowing the tools beside it haven't walked off. We didn't fix the world. No one here pretends that. But we took one small cut of it, this stretch of woods and gravel and effort, and we made it work. We wrote rules that stayed written. We built habits that held when pressure came. And now, when someone out there says our name, they think of clean water barrels, rope coiled right, a ladder that holds weight, and a post with enough discipline to keep the stupid kind of chaos outside the line. That's not the world we lost, but it's one we can live in, and maybe that's enough.